Hello, Bob Stauffer here from the Oilers Radio Network to the Bird Construction team at the Suncor project in Fort McMurray. Great job on the amazing 2 weeks for doing things clean and safe as everybody looked out for each other. Keep up the great work on this project. Reminder, you have 6 hours left before you head home, so please keep in mind in terms of your tasks and enjoy the next 7 days off as you cheer on your Edmonton Oilers in the playoffs, just like Tony Estevez will be doing. Now play La Bamba, Scotty.
Welcome back to the 2 Months podcast presented by BioSteel and powered by GoGo Sports. I'm your host, Joshua Marshall. Today we got Phil Stockley with us. Phil, how's it going?
Doing pretty good. Got the outdoor rink all cleaned up this weekend. So, it's a bittersweet thing because it means summer's just around the corner. We're in full fledged spring here in Edmonton. And so yard's getting tidied up. Boys had their awards out in New Sarepta today for their minor hockey. So it was a good day.
Perfect. All right. And we got a special guest with us. He does this every time the playoffs just get started. He is a recurring guest on our podcast. And every time we do our playoff preview, Stauffer joins us. We like to welcome from the Edmonton Oilers Radio Network and color analyst on 630 Ched, and also hockey analyst on Rogers Sportsnet on the regional coverage. We like to welcome back to the 2 Months podcast, Bob Stauffer. Stauffer, how's it going?
Good. How you doing, Josh? I got to ask Phil a question here. Who's the best player ever out of New Sarepta?
Yeah, Phil, who's the best?
You got me. I know you probably know.
Well, I played against Steve Godas, who got into the National Hockey League with Pittsburgh in the late 1980s. And Colin Gregor, Jason Gregor's older brother, was from New Sarepta as well. So he played on a very tough team with the Victoria Cougars, went on and played for the Kate Axemen. They won the 1993 national championship. They lost to the Bears in the 92 national title, and unfortunately, Colin was suspended. They had a line brawl at the end of the Atlantic Championships that year. Godas was a tricky little player. In fact, his son, I believe his name is, off the top of my head, I think his son's name is Graydon. He is with the Edmonton Oil Kings, and obviously Colin Gregor's son, Noah Gregor, plays for the San Jose Sharks. So those would be, and I think Colin technically ended up living in Beaumont. But when I was growing up, we played New Sarepta in the Highway 14 League. I played for Fulton Vale and then the Strathcona Warriors, and Godas was definitely their best player.
Nice. No, it's and Noah Gregor had a pretty good year. I know it was he didn't really start with the team to start, but when he was in the lineup for on a regular basis, he had I think he finished with 10 goals around there and had a hat trick not too long ago before the season was over. So definitely
that's great. Yep. I know there's a crew out of New Sarepta that listens to our podcast now, so they're gonna love it. Thanks, Bob.
Hey,
perfect.
Useless, superfluous information. That's kind of what I do.
Yeah, I guess, eh? But yeah, before we jump into our playoff preview stuff, as Staff always joins us for these type episodes before the playoffs start. Kind of would do a quick breakdown of the Calgary Flames and a year of shock. I know you and I talked Staff, and Phil's a big Flames fan here, but what do you make of the season that they had? Obviously, you've seen a lot of the press conference that the players had too, and how shocking it was in a weird year in all those 1-goal games and whatnot. But in a whole sum of what you think, does Daryl come back? Does Brad come back? And what do you think did go wrong? And I'll point this: Jeff Merrick said he's never seen a player get demised by another team or another player, in meaning Jacob Markstrom getting the not looking the same after that Oilers series, and that translated over the season. But I don't know what your thoughts on it. We'll throw to you first, and we'll get
my thoughts are, I can't believe, even when I think back to that Battle of Alberta and being in that building, the Saddle Dome for Game 1, and the Flames won 9-6, and they're up 6-1 in that game, and the Oilers tied at 6-6. And at that point, I knew in that game anything was possible. But Calgary ended up winning Game 1, as you guys know, 9-6. Matthew Tkachuk had a hat trick. And I remember thinking early in the second period when it was 3-1 for Calgary, Oilers might be in trouble here. And Edmonton just got to another level, and Calgary couldn't answer. Like, the Oilers elevated offensively. Markstrom, fought the puck. Calgary, they put a lot of pucks on the net. I think if you looked at the A-grade scoring opportunities from that point on, it was pretty even, but Edmonton's got the better finishers. And a small thing in terms of what happened in that series. When Mikey Anderson, and we'll talk about this later, when he rolled Leon Draisaitl's ankle, that forced the Oilers to play Draisaitl on the wing because he didn't have the, he just couldn't, he didn't have the power to play down the middle at center. And they put McDavid with Draisaitl, and they outplayed that top line for Calgary. That line of Tkachuk, Lindholm, and Goodrow that was so good. From the middle of that second period on in game 2, Leon and Connor dominated the Flames. And I think it altered the course and direction of that organization. Like, I saw Guy Goodrow in Columbus, and he pointed out the Flames had no answer for those top 2 guys together. He goes, they put those top 2 guys together, and it was, he goes, it was incredible to watch, incredibly frustrating. And of course, Johnny elected not to re-sign in Calgary. Tkachuk elected not to re-sign. I think Treliving did a great job getting what he got ultimately in the trade for Tkachuk. Just didn't work. Will Markstrom be the same? I think he'll bounce back. He's too good of a goalie, Josh, not to bounce back. But I, for one, am shocked that Calgary didn't make the playoffs this year.
Yeah.
I mean, they came in, they were the best team in the division last year. I didn't see them not making the playoffs.
Yeah, it was definitely a weird year with everything that went on, and the new players coming in, and even to that point of what you talked about, Guy Goodrow, and I know you and I kind of talked about that before, and talking to Toffoli and Luch and Backlund, who are all friends of our podcast, they kind of say the same thing. I just remember after game 2 of the season here in Edmonton, Toffoli and Luch came up to see me after the game, and I met them, and they got lucky to get the 2 points out of that first series, that first match in the regular season. And they just said, once those 2 guys get going, it's almost impossible to stop them. So Phil, your thoughts on kind of what happened this season? I know there's some up and down and some frustrating moments, but overall, after a couple of days, what do you think?
It's kind of like I just talked about all season, right? If this team never went on a big losing streak or a big winning streak, they just kind of would get a little bit of momentum, and then it would just die, and then they would lose a couple, and then they'd win a couple. And just going back to even right at the end of the season there, you beat Chicago, and then you beat Nashville in that overtime, and where are we sitting?
Yeah,
like we're I don't know if we're quite in, but we're a lot closer. But losing to like the Chicagos, like what did we go 0-3 against Chicago this year?
Yeah,
yeah, lost the game to Columbus, lost to the Ducks. Like those games are gonna, and I remember them happening. Even like thinking back to I don't know if you guys remember that Ottawa game where we blew it in the last minute, lost it in overtime. It's just like, in the moment, you're like, we'll take the overtime loss. But now thinking back in hindsight, it's like, man, that overtime win would have really helped, right? So,
well, they're at a real crossroads now, right? Feel like they got all those guys of the year left in their deals. Like, Backlund, there's about 15 teams in the league that like to have him as a third line center. What happens with Lindholm? Does he commit to a long-term extension? He is a first line center. It's a great two-way center that's a highly productive offensive player. What about Hannafin? Hannafin's an American. They lost Fox, they lost Tkachuk, and they lost Goodrow. Those guys are all American players. So I'm going to be very intrigued to see what happens here. And answer your question, Josh, on who's left standing. Only one of Brad, in my opinion, only one of Brad Treliving or Daryl Sutter is going to be left standing. I don't know who that is, but I can't see the 2 of them together. Just everything I'm hearing, it would not surprise me if only one of the 2 were left. And we all know that Tree's contract is up. I think he does an excellent job. And Daryl's got 2 years left, and the reports are it's like $4 million a year. I don't know if that's true.
Yeah, it's 4.2.
Daryl's won a couple Stanley Cups, speaks for itself.
Reigning Jack Adams Trophy winner too.
Yeah, like that team to me did not reach the zenith of their potential this year, right? And the coach has to accept some burden of responsibility on that. Your job as a coach, just like you guys are in the workforce, you manage people, your job is to get the most out of people. And today, the way to get the most out of people is to positively reinforce, get them to know that you care about them and that you believe in them and that you support them. And that's why we're seeing younger coaches be successful in the NHL. So, Daryl's accomplished a lot of things. I'll be really intrigued to see how things all shake out in Calgary here. Because I do think, I don't know if you can bring the band all back together between the GM and the head coach. And in terms of the players, they have a lot of good players, but it didn't end up resulting in a playoff spot.
Yeah. Yeah. And Eric Francis reported about 4 days ago that it's a 2-year deal left, 2-year deal for Sutter at $4.2 million. So he had that. And I think Elliot Friedman talked about that on his not recent podcast, the one before that. I think they just put one out today. But yeah, it will be interesting to see. I don't see it. And I'll see, I don't know how many times Tyler Toffoli has had to say how much he cares and loves Daryl and
Yeah.
supports him as a coach. And he's very vocal about that through podcasts, through media outlets of doing other things. So we'll see what happens there. The door isn't closed, but it'll be an interesting off season, and you probably can hear it in Backlund's voice too. It looks like he kind of wants maybe a change of scenery. And in that press conference there, he didn't sound like he was committing anything long term, but he did want to win a Stanley Cup in Calgary. But maybe it's time for a change for him, and we'll see. Good. And as you said, Stauffer, there'd be 15, 16 teams probably lining up to have that guy as their third line center. So, and maybe one here in the local market, in my opinion, but we'll see what happens. But we'll move over to the playoffs here. I think this is probably going to be the best, at least first round we've ever seen in quite some time with what we've seen this year. And this matchup between LA and Edmonton is going to be very interesting. The one thing I want to start with, Stoff, though, is Todd McClellan very well. He was here in Edmonton. One of the knocks maybe on him is he's had this great success in the regular season, but maybe it hasn't transitioned over to the playoffs. I want to start there, though. Where do you stand here in the level of pressure, concern with Todd and trying to get this done? I know Drew Doughty was on After Hours about a month ago, and he really wanted this matchup. He was very vocal about it with Jared Stoll and Scott Oak, how much he wanted it, how much he wasn't in the series last year. We'll get to that. But where are things at here with Todd? Is there more pressure on that situation with LA than it is Edmonton?
No, there's more pressure on Edmonton. Edmonton's supposed to be here. I'd say the LA Kings are 3/4 of the year ahead of where they're supposed to be. Like, they were surprised for me to make the playoffs last year. The fact that they extended the series to 7 games without Doughty and Arvidsson was an accomplishment. I think Edmonton struggled with LA's 1-3-1 neutral zone. Though in game 6 and game 7, I think the Oilers figured it out and elevated. So I think Todd's a good coach. He had, got to 2 conference finals in San Jose. I think if Edmonton had showed greater composure as a team in 2017, they get to the conference final that year. They lost 3 games to Anaheim by a goal, 2 in overtime, and they didn't get an even strength goal from the line of Nugent Hopkins, Lucic, and Everly in the first 4 games. Then they broke that line up and put Pouliot with Nugent Hopkins and Everly, and still didn't get an even strength goal. So that's $22 million worth of players that didn't score an even strength goal. And they did suffer some injuries on D, but I look at the game 5, and you can point to the hold on Cam Talbot in front of the net all you want, but the reality is Oilers blew a 3-0 lead. So I think Todd's a really good coach. I think he's accelerated the process. I think LA's ahead of it. That said, absolutely he wants to beat the Oilers, and it is game on with some of the extracurricular stuff. Like, we're not seeing anything out of Los Angeles, getting very little information on that front. They do have some injuries, especially at forward. I think they're going to be okay on defense. But I think they had a 5-year plan. I think the 5-year plan was to have LA where the team was last year, this year. And I think as a result, the team this year thinks absolutely they can beat Edmonton. And they should think that way. But I also think the Oilers have a way better team this year than they had last year. Yeah, I will mention Todd's in the last year of a 5-year deal. The pressure for me on LA is going to be next season.
Yeah,
in my opinion, because I think he's done a pretty good job with that hockey squad.
He does. Phil, you have anything there? You want to jump and we'll get into more things, but is there something that sticks out to you that you want to hit with off with?
Just like you just mentioned Drew Doughty. What like what's he gonna bring to this series as opposed to last season?
Obviously,
Well, I mean, he plays the second most of any defenseman in the league. And the pairing of Mikey Anders, it's interesting what's happened here, you guys. Evander Kane didn't play in the first two games between Edmonton and LA. So the Oilers came back from one of those 4-game road trips, and I was on that trip. I'm on all the trips, but we were in Florida. That's where it wrapped. It was a weird trip because we went. Washington gave up 4 goals on the PK. The Oilers did, and then they went down to Tampa. That's the game where Kane had his, the wrist tendon severed. And Yamamoto got hurt in that game. And they won that game. And then they got blown out in Carolina and then bounced back with a victory over Florida. And that was an impressive win for the team in Florida. Like, Florida's got a high-scoring team. Florida could be a little dangerous for Boston here, depending upon the health of Boston centers. And then they came back and played LA. And it was a 2-1 game with an empty netter. Trevor Moore got a hat trick. Like, it was just a quiet, efficient game, but the Oilers missed Kane's physicality, and they missed. You know what? I thought LA did an excellent job, sort of shutting Edmonton down. The second time the two teams met, Kane was with the team on the road. We were in Los Angeles. Edmonton had just recalled Darnay, but not inserted in the lineup. They didn't have Ekholm. They didn't have Bukestad. And the Kings got like 5 of the first 6 power plays in the game and scored 4 goals. Right. And then there were the 3 fights at the end of the game. Since that game, which was on January 9th, Edmonton's got the best record in the NHL. They went 29-5-6 in the final 40 games after that game. Yeah. I think they galvanized from the third period. And they also added Ekholm and Bukestad. Darnay became a regular. They only lost 5 of the 36 games that Darnay played. Okay. They had a real good record when he was in there. And obviously Kane came back, and they played LA twice late in the year. And Kane had 7 hits in the first period of the game in Edmonton and 5 hits in the first period of the second game in LA. And I thought Edmonton physically took it to Los Angeles. Completely different dimension. They were patient. They didn't worry about the LA 1-3-1. They put pucks in good spots and got into the forecheck and pounded the Kings. Every hit was an investment against LA. Those were different wins for Edmonton. They kind of, in my mind, they kind of beat LA's own game. So Doughty's really good. They got Anderson back. Don't forget, Anderson got hurt early, first minute of that game at Edmonton. So the Kings and partisans will say, well, we got Anderson Doughty together. Oilers fans will say, we got Kane back up and running. And those 2 players were influential in the results of the respective teams. It should be a good series. And I'd tack on +1 just because Todd's coaching LA, and I think he knows how to coach against Edmonton. I do think Edmonton's going to win this series. I mean, they've got, several players having all-world years. They're way deeper than they've been, but LA is going to be a tough out.
Yeah. Phil, you have something there you wanted to?
Oh, keep going. So living in Edmonton, being around Oiler fans all the time, the hype is like crazy right now. Basically, you talk to any Oilers fan, they're winning the Stanley Cup. Every bracket you see coming out, they're winning the Stanley Cup. And I got to give credit where credit's due. The Oilers look really good. And the Oilers, obviously, I think they can win the Stanley Cup. I think they are good enough to win the Stanley Cup. But it does really remind me of the Calgary Flames last year when I honestly felt like they never lost in the tail end of the season last season. And then, the hype was there. We were all excited as Calgary Flames fans. And then everybody knows what happened. We ran into the Edmonton Oilers, and it hurt really bad when we lost that series. So my question to you is like, what happens to this fan base if you go down 2 games?
Well, one of the things that happened last year with Calgary is they played Edmonton's game, Phil.
You're right.
They tried to trade chances with Edmonton and run and gun with the Oilers. They didn't. They built that record by playing strong defensive hockey. And the Oilers were an offensive team all year with a world-class power play, best we've ever seen, highest scoring team in the league. But they shorted up defensively and shorted up the PK down the stretch. They only gave up 7 goals against in their final 6 games. So, and I like the fact that Edmonton, even, do you recall the last regular season meeting between Calgary and Edmonton in Calgary last year? Because the Oilers won the first 2 matchups of the year, and the last regular season,
it was a big
9-5.
blowout. Yeah.
It was a 9-5 victory, and then they win 9-6 again. And I just wonder if that, as crazy as it sounds, if it worked against the Flames. Thinking we can just sit there and play riverboat. And then for Daryl Sutter to say after the game, we got beat by 1 player. Well, who's he referring to? Draisaitl? Because Draisaitl had 17 points in 5 games. He's obviously talking about McDavid, but Draisaitl had 17 points in 5 games. Zach Hyman scored in every game of that series between Edmonton and Calgary last year. And Kane had a hat trick in game 3, and Nugent Hopkins scored 2 huge goals in game 4. I just look at, I see the 2 teams different because we've seen this from Calgary before. Like, have they not been first 3 of the last 6 years, where they come in first and then they have a huge drop?
That stat come out just recently, right? Vegas and Calgary alternating the division titles, right? So
you want my theory on this? Okay, and you might not like it, but I don't think a lot of teams get up to play Calgary. When Calgary's on their game in the past, they're a hard, especially once they got Luch, they're a hard team to play against, right? They can physically, Backlund's a pain in the ass as a 3rd line center. They got some skill, could chuck us in your face, and they're not easy to play against. The Oilers wanted to play in the past an offensive game, but they also had McDavid and Draisaitl who could embarrass you. So other teams brought their best against Edmonton. And when we're talking a 2-point margin between Vegas and Edmonton this year, the Oilers last year in the back half of the year were the best team in the Western Conference, not Calgary. And this year, in the back half of this year, Edmonton's been the best team in the Western Conference again. And if I don't know how much you guys trust goal differential, but I do. Take a look at the goal differential in the second half of the season.
Yep.
Edmonton had this year the best goal differential. So it's a fair comment to sit there and say, here's the thing. I mean, what if this, what if that? I just know I have more confidence in Edmonton playing LA this year, even though LA's got Doughty, than I did last year, because I know Edmonton's capable of playing a lot more different styles. They can be patient. They can play defensive. They can play physical. They don't solely have to rely on playing run and gun, and that's because they've matured as a team. Now, I may ultimately be proven to be completely wrong, Phil. Like, it may be, maybe the Oilers get knocked. Maybe it's too much in the moment for Stuart Skinner. It's a pretty even-keeled guy. But in my opinion, as somebody who watches the team over the last couple of years, there is a confidence without a swagger, a quiet confidence about this team, realizing that they're at a different place as a team than they've been there before.
Yeah. The one thing that's interesting to me, and I thought they rushed Fiala back, and then he got hurt again. There was a game against St. Louis in LA. He kind of just went one way, and no one even touched him, and then he kind of rehurt himself, played the rest of that game, and then played next game and then missed. But if and that was the thing, it's Gabe Vilardi and him weren't in the lineup the last 2 times these teams met, and it's a 2-2 even series. If Vilardi and Fiala play Stauffer, how much does that give them more of a dimension? And you're not getting a lot of physical out of Kevin Fiala, but you might get it out of Vilardi. But where are you at with those guys being interjected to the lineup? They have traveled to Edmonton, but there's no confirmation if they're going to be playing tomorrow night.
Yeah, well, I'd say this about Fiala: it's the way they deploy him. They play him against the opposition's 3rd parents, and he destroys them. So it's a real smart way that Todd handles that. And Todd would tell you, because I had this conversation on his deck in Kelowna. I told him Vilardi was going to be a player. Yeah. I like Vilardi, right? Like, so, I mean, those are, again, the Oilers. Here's where I circle back. Edmonton didn't have Kane and Yamamoto the first time they played last year, and both those guys scored 20 goals last year in the regular season. Kane had 35 goals in 58 games and led the playoffs in scoring. Like, he's more of an established goal scorer than either of those 2 guys. So Edmonton didn't have those guys available, and conversely, LA didn't have 2 20-goal scorers in Fiala and Vilardi available. it's a huge, it's for me, especially Fiala. If he can't go, that's a big loss for the Kings because I think he changes the dynamic.
Yeah.
You know, I think it takes away the opportunity for them to win 5-4, 6-5 games, not having him. They have to play a specific way.
Yeah.
Big losses, no question.
Yeah, if they play, I think it goes 7. If they don't play, this might be done in 5. In my opinion, I think that
You see the schedule, the way the schedule works.
Yeah, obviously that's the factor that you got the Kings or the Lakers and the Clippers.
It totally works out to the older team. Like you got a 33-year-old defenseman and 35-year-old first line center, a 4-day break in between game 5 and game 6. That works out to LA's advantage.
Yeah, you don't see that really ever in the playoffs.
Not anymore.
I remember Roberto Luongo getting mad when they played the Islanders the last time they were the Panthers. When the Islanders and Tavares, the only time Tavares ever advanced to the second round, and they had to play 3 games in 4 nights, and that's very rare in the playoffs. That was that game. As you know, Alexander Petrovich was on that team, and he was in the number 1 pairing with Brian Campbell, and they were really good. So Petro had a point per game in that series too, but it'll be interesting for sure. I think Edmonton wins. I do think Edmonton gets to the Stanley Cup final, is my prediction, but we'll get to all that in a second. But because I think the Avalanche aren't the same. I don't know when Makar is going to be back. Obviously,
he's playing.
Is he
right away? They got their top 6 back. Makar and Manson are all in.
Yeah, so that will be good for them. But I think I don't like losing having not Kadri there, and obviously their captain Landeskog, who hasn't been there all year.
And Burakovsky.
Yeah, and Burakovsky. So, those are big losses for sure. But maybe there's another Arturi Lehkonen, like he's still there, but maybe someone else steps up like he did last year for them. Skinner, Stuart Skinner. You've seen this guy a lot, Stauf. You've seen him. He's homegrown. He's gotten better at every level, every year. He's progressed in an amazing way. Set these records this year. I think he deserves the nomination. Some Calder votes here. We'll see if where things transition to that. But level of concern with him going into the playoffs, I feel like you probably be pretty confident, but you never know. But where are you at with him and the season he had? And, the crease is his right now.
The fact that he's just so chill, the fact that he's so mature, and Connor joked the other day that, and maybe it's not going to be on Oilers Plus, but we talked a bit about Skinner and just said there's days it seems like he's older than me. He's already raising a family and he's married and, settled down. From a family of 9, I did see him in that Bantam AAA year with the South Side in 12-13. Every Sunday night, I went out to Millwoods Arena. There was Skinner, there was Tyler Benson, there was David Quenville, there was James Hamlin. And I'm not surprised. And Carter Hart was with Sherwood Park, and so was Sam Steele. So I saw those 2 teams play twice. Mason Shaw was playing with Lloyd at that time. Saw him play. I got a lot of confidence in where Stewart's going. I like big goalies. He's 6'4". He's got a thick build. He has great economy of movement. He's got a real good ability to track the puck. And he's not sporadic in the net. He's not jumping around. He's not inconsistent. He's chill. You get the same, and the players will tell you that. So I'm fairly bullish on him. And I'm hoping that Campbell will bounce, is there in support if the Oilers do go on a run. And I also hope that Campbell can bounce back next year because he only played for the Oilers from a cap management perspective is to give this guy another opportunity to get his game right.
Yeah. Matthias Ekholm, Stauf, obviously the record with him in the lineup is unreal. We know that Nashville Predators organization has had so much in great defensemen along the years, but maybe he didn't get talked about enough. I know Fids loves him a lot. Matt Benning loves him a lot. They talked about how great he was. He comes here and then there's probably more of a light on the player he is, the person he is. And what he's brought to this organization. Did you think he was going to have this kind of impact?
No.
Yeah.
I thought he'd help. I thought it was a great trade. I hated seeing Schaefer getting traded.
Yeah.
Josh, because Schaefer is he's a unicorn in today's hockey and junior hockey. Nobody fights anymore. Nobody plays with a burr up their saddle. Everybody's got skill. He's a big man with emerging skill that's not timid. He was, I mean, Ken Holland said in Oilers now, he was an absolute must to be included in the trade. So I thought Ekholm would improve the defense. I didn't think Edmonton would go 18-2-1. He would, I mean, who would have thought he would have gone plus 28 and 21 games? And look what he's done for Bouchard. Not to mention he's eased the workload on Burns, and I think in time he'll even help Broberg develop. So I did not have that. It's been a great fit. He's been the most impactful trade deadline day addition in the National Hockey League.
Yeah, Phil, you got something there. I know you want to talk stuff about the depth in case there's an injury happening and what this roster looks like going into the playoffs.
Yeah, like especially like Ekholm comes in and that pushes Nurse back to the second pairing, right?
Yeah.
So like look like that alone, what that's done for the Oilers' depth. But can you talk like about the Oilers' depth like up front?
Well, I mean, the only team in the league with 250 goal scorers, 435 goal scorers. There's 3 teams that have 12 forwards that have 10 plus goals: Edmonton, Vegas, and Seattle. So LA has 11. The other 3 teams have 12, and there hadn't been a team with 12 since New Jersey back in 93, 94. Edmonton's, it's funny. They've got 5 forwards capable of playing 18 minutes a game. And you look at goal differential, and for the last 3 full seasons before this year, 5-on-5 goal differential when McDavid and Draisaitl were not on the ice was -29, -23, -22. And I think they headed in the last game of the year +13. So that to me is an illustration. Bukestad's helped down the middle. He's another right shot that can help out in the circle. They got to get Costin going. He's been a little quiet, but he provides physicality. Janmark has been a very effective player for them. He plays 14 and a half minutes, and they just got McLeod back from injury. And I think the first recall will be Dylan Holloway. So that would be the guy that would come up. So you guys, when they lost to Winnipeg 2 years ago in the Scotiabank North Division, they're basically playing 8 or 9 forwards. And they were playing, I mean, they only played in that triple overtime game that they lost the game 4 in. They played Nurse and Larson, and Chris Russell was with Tyson Barrie. And then they had Cuckoo and Bear, and Cuckoo and Bear hardly played. Like, they're a way deeper team. So I'm not worried about the depth at all, especially given there's only one team that can say we got 250 goal scorers, 435 plus goal scorers, and 12 10 plus goal scorers. Like the other, Vegas doesn't even have a 30 goal scorer.
Yeah.
Seattle's got the one guy that sniped 40. McCann's turned into a real good offensive player, and then they have nobody else above 30. So Edmonton's got more scoring depth than anybody else.
Yeah, I just like, even as you were talking about that, I that Winnipeg series came up in my mind too. And I remember in that triple overtime game, it looked like Connor McDavid was even skating in mud. Yeah. And then that turnover happened. They came down, ended the series, right? So absolutely.
They also lost to Connor Hellebuck.
Right.
They lost to a Vezina Trophy winning goaltender, and he won 3 overtime games against them.
Yeah.
Right. It's a factor.
And he's still Connor Hellebuck. So
yeah, absolutely.
We'll get to that shortly too. So
all right, so we'll do prediction time. I don't know, Stauffer. Do you want to give predictions? I know.
Sure, let's do sure. You're gonna get them first, and then I'll do them on the show tomorrow. We'll do the West.
Okay.
So I got I'll say Edmonton in 6.
Okay.
It's the Todd McLellan factor. Otherwise, it'd be 5 for me.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll say Edmonton in 6.
Okay.
I think Colorado will beat Seattle in 5.
Okay.
Okay. Vegas and Winnipeg. I'm gonna take Vegas in 6. I think Winnipeg's gonna get a couple games there, and that leaves Dallas and Minnesota. I just think Minnesota lacks a little bit of scoring up. They're really physical, and Dallas has Jake Ottinger. So I'll take Dallas in 6 games in that series.
Okay. Phil, where are you at with yours?
I've got it written down. So like I have proof that I didn't just copy Bob. But I also have the Oilers in 6. I have the Colorado Avalanche in 5.
Wow.
I have the Dallas Stars in 7. and I have the Winnipeg Jets with the upset in 6 because of Connor Hellebuck.
All right, so I got the Oilers in 7. So that's if the Kings get their healthy guys back. If not, if Lardy and Fiala don't make appearances in this series, I think this one ends pretty quickly. I got Colorado in 7 in that one. I think this one goes a bit of the distance in that one too. And I got Dallas in 7, and I got Winnipeg in 7. So I think we're getting a lot of game 7s out west, in my opinion. I just think everything was so close this year. And obviously adding Stone back in the lineup for Vegas will be a big thing if he plays game 1, which is trending in that direction, I think. But all right, we'll finish up out east. And Staff, as you know, I'm a Leaf fan. So and Phil, if the Leafs win this series, it is because of why, Staff?
It's time.
Yeah.
I don't think Tampa is anywhere near as good as they've been.
Oilers were 2-0 against Tampa this year too. So
the Oilers are 2-0. Yeah. I think Toronto's going to win the series in 5 games. Okay. Tampa might get a game at home. I liked how the Leafs played in Tampa. Did they not sit out Matthews and Marner in that game?
Yeah, and they didn't. He didn't play. Samsonov didn't play, and a couple guys on the back end didn't play either. So they were missing.
But they were physical against Tampa. Tampa does the same thing every time they get behind in games. They start stirring the crap out in the ice. Those older veteran guys. I'm going to take the Maple Leafs in 5 over Tampa. I just think it's time for them. I realize they're going up against Vasilevsky. I think Toronto's been very unlucky not to have, Now, one thing that has to happen is Marner and Matthews each have 33 career playoff points. Mm-hmm. They've played 39 games in the playoffs. So last year, McDavid had 33 playoff points in 16 games, and Leon had 32 points in 16 games, basically on a high ankle sprain. Those guys Matthews and Marner got to be more productive. But I just think that the Maple Leafs are a deeper, more balanced team and more capable of dealing with Tampa Bay.
Yeah. Phil,
so what's the new chirp going to be for Oiler fans to Toronto Maple Leaf fans if Toronto gets through the first round?
If there's nothing that needs to be said. I mean, I'd say wait to see what your own team. Wait to see what your own team does. Like
that, exactly.
Right. Like I'm more worried about. If I'm an Oilers fan, I want to make sure my team gets to the level they need to get to. I'm not worried about what Toronto's. My own personal opinion is I think the time has come that Toronto's going to win a series. So now I got to tell you, the one series that I think is going to be way closer than everybody think is who's Boston playing?
Yeah, you just
Florida.
said it earlier. You said it earlier, Florida, and
I think that's going to be a hard series for Boston. Yeah. Krejci didn't finish the year in their lineup at center. He's well in his mid-30s. Bergeron got hurt late, last game of the year in the first period. They didn't bring him back. Boston does have depth. They were, a wagon all year long. But Florida can score, and Florida's tough. Yeah. And they got a guy in Kachuk that drags this whole team in a quagmire, and they can back it up. They got Giovanni Smith and Longberg, who used to play for the Flames, runs around a little bit. Their defense is really great. They create a lot in the back end. I know there's people picking Boston for. I think Boston will win the series, but I think it's going to be 6 or 7 for the Bruins.
Yeah, I agree. And, we'll see what Ullmark does. He hasn't had that experience either, too. So it's there. As for the Leafs stuff, their power play hasn't been good in the playoffs. Besides, I think 17-18, it was 26%. Other than that, it's been under 20. What do you think is the reason because of that? And what has we don't, and at times for a while there, I don't think it has happened for at least this season, but I think Connor and Leon in their own category, and then I think there's a category below. Maybe McKinnon's with them too, or whatnot. But what is it with the Leafs and that killer instinct, as Brendan Shanahan said, that they didn't have last year in years to come, but they might have it this year?
Well, in fairness, they were playing the two-time Stanley Cup champs last year with the best goaltender in the world,
Yeah.
Vasilevsky, right? I just know what I've seen out of Tampa this year. There's holes in that team's game. They're not like they played a lot of extra hockey the last 3 years. They haven't been able to keep the band all together. They're right for the picking in that series.
Yeah.
Carey Price, 930 save percentage, final 3 games of Toronto, Montreal in the second round in 2021. So that's Tampa, Montreal, 2020. There's no excuse against Columbus. They should have won that series. Like, I'm sorry. They should have found a way to beat Columbus. And then Kadri, 2 years in a row against the Bruins. If he just stays in one of those series, do they win? Because he's clearly an impactful player. Is there, does it chart another course of direction for the organization if they would have won one of those 2 series? I don't know. They're in on everybody. They're an expansive group. They've got more guys in analytics and everything else. I just think Tampa Bay, believe it or not, is the right team for them to play in the first round. I think they're going to be fine.
Yeah. Phil, what do you got? Bob got some in 5. You got Toronto or Tampa. Who do you got there?
I got Toronto in 6.
All right. And I got Toronto in 7. So for some reason, I think it goes game 7.
What about Boston, Florida?
Boston, Florida. You make a good point, and that team's been different since Keith Kachuk went on TSN radio with Kolyakovo and Aaron Korolnik and called out the Panthers. They've only lost once, and that one loss was against Toronto. I think they're 7-0-1 in that stretch since he called them out and said that they're soft. But I don't know, man. So, there's just something with that trophy. You win it. When you face adversity, sometimes it when you haven't faced it all year and it gets to you it can kind of spiral out of control. I want to say I say Boston in 6, but the heart kind of says Panthers in 7. But so that's what I got. What do you got, Stauf?
Yeah, I'm going. I'll say Boston 6.
6. Okay, Phil, you got?
I got Florida in 7.
Florida.
I think Kachuk's gonna have a monster series.
All right.
That's just going to rub it in the faces of all the Flames fans, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just part of the roller coaster ride of being a Flames fan, right?
There you go.
Okay, we'll finish up on the other ones here. Stauf, what's your thoughts on this Devils versus Rangers series? And will Hughes play on the back end for them in this series here?
Well, Hughes will. Severson's going to be an interesting guy to watch in the offseason. There's going to be a lot of teams that are going to be. Yeah. I mean, they've got Hamilton, who they love, and he had a huge offensive season. Marino, the former Oilers pick, is their defensive guy. I think they got 2 right shot. Isn't Nemec with them as well?
Yeah.
In the future, so they're looking good on D. I do think Luke Hughes plays, and I think the Rangers win the series. Mm-hmm. I think that New Jersey's unproven up front. I think they're a little small. They are fast. So I think the Rangers win that series in 6 games.
6K, yeah. And I got the Rangers in 6 too. Phil?
I also have the Rangers in 6.
Okay. All right. So we'll see what happens there. That'll be good. And then obviously we got the Carolina Hurricanes in the New York Islanders. For some reason, Sorokin has in my head here that he is one of the best in the game. I think there's an upset here. I think losing Pacioretty, who you really didn't have all year, but Svechnikov not being there too. I say there's an upset here, and I do think it is the Islanders in 7. Stauf?
I'll say Carolina in 5.
Okay.
I know everyone's thinking the way you are, Josh, but my theory on this is Carolina was so far ahead for so long that they didn't need to play at that level to close out the season. I grant you they haven't scored the same since Svechnikov went out. It's basically a 40 and 30 goal score out of their lineup. To me, they're still a really good team. They get a lot of offense from the back end, and the Islanders have struggled at times to score. And I know Sorokin's good, but I think Carolina's actually going to be okay in that series. I think they'll win her in 5.
And Phil?
I have it written down. Okay, I swear it's all written down. But I say the New York Islanders will give their old faithful 1 win and go down in 5 to the Carolina Hurricanes.
All right.
Great minds think alike, Phil.
Yeah, exactly.
There you go. Just one last one for you, Staff. Were you shocked? And we'll fit. That's our end for the playoff stuff. Were you shocked what happened with the Penguins and Burke and Hextall being let go? And that's the last question as we finish up the pod.
Well, it was weird because I saw Brian and Ron in Pittsburgh when we were there, and the Oilers shredded the Penguins. Like I think the score is 20-7 the last 4 times the two teams have met. Like Leon and Connor get up to play against Crosby and Malkin.
Yeah.
And they were doing the fire Hextall chant during that game. It was 6-1 in the third period for Edmonton. And I'm telling you right now, Connor and Leon laid off the gas pedal. Connor scored on a penalty shot goal against DeSmith. He didn't even react. Like it's almost like he didn't want to rub it in on Sid. Their bottom six was awful. Some of the moves they've made have been really perplexing. I didn't get the Granlund trade. That made no sense to me at all. They got lucky that somebody took Kapanen off their hands. St. Louis did. So to be honest with you, given that there was new ownership, I'm not surprised that they made the decision they did in Pittsburgh.
Yeah. All right. Well, Staff, thanks for everything.
Yeah, call me before the conference final if you want.
Yes, we'll do that for sure. So you have
and Phil, you better look up your New Sarepta, the best players out of New Sarepta.
I will. Maybe one of my boys will be on that list one day. Hey,
if they can overcome your genetics, they might have a chance.
Exactly.
Maybe. Yeah. We were talking about that today. There was one boy in U18 and he's like 6'7".
Yeah.
So I'm 5'8". My wife's 5'0". So it's like not looking too good. So
well, there's a kid coming up in the Bantam draft named Keaton Verhoff. He's 6'4" and 195 pounds. He's a right shot defenseman. He's 14.
He's gonna be
unreal.
And I can tell you, there's guys already in the WHL that think this guy's gonna have a pro career. They're like, he's a slam dunk to play. Now he's not Bouwmeester in terms of being as dynamic of a skater, but he might be a little bit more well-rounded in his game. He's got a little bit of a, he's living with Jerome McGinley, playing for Rink in Kelowna, and he's got a chance to be a real player.
Jerry Johansson client too, and
there you go, nicely done.
Exactly, and I'll say this: Vernon Fiddler's kid, Blake Fiddler, who's going to be with the Oil Kings next year. That kid is going to be a player too. He is 6'3", 185 pounds.
Awesome.
He's going to be a stud, and he can walk the line. So if he and I'm not just saying because Vern's our boy. That's just in my opinion from what I've seen of Blake this year. So,
how many times have you asked Vern about the time he mimicked Kevin Bieksa?
Quite a few times.
That's one of the funniest things of all time.
The best meme ever, and it was just funny because Jamie Benn came to him. He's like, "You're trending on Twitter," and he's like, "What did I do?" And so they showed him, and it's just life of its own. And the best was when during the COVID and stuff, Bieksa took a picture of that and put it behind his screen in Anaheim when he was doing Hockey Night Canada from his home.
That was good stuff.
For sure. All right, Staff. Well, enjoy the week. Have fun. Let's get after it and play La Bamba, baby. So have a good
All right. Stay safe, fellas.
You too. Take care.
All right. Thanks guys.